Yeah, I shaved my head. As you can see, it feels so fluffy. Anyways, today we're talking about the Consumer Rights Wiki. So if we actually go ahead and check out the Consumer Rights Wiki, this was created by Louis Rossmann and the Fulu Foundation, and it's still relatively new actually, but they've had they have quite a few articles and quite a few active contributors, even though they just started out, which is really cool to see. You can only imagine like what this will look like in a few years, right? Like it's pretty cool. Now, there is something I want to talk about today, and it's an idea that I had, because I actually really see the vision when it comes to this Consumer Rights Wiki, but I believe that there's still a lot of room for growth. I think that it's a good start, but I think that there could be a lot more to improve it, and I've had an idea that I've done some research on, and I ended up talking to one of the kind of managers of the project, and then I ended up making a GitHub issue post about it. So you can go read my GitHub issue post. I'll go ahead and actually, it's right here. It's issue 23 in the central repository right here. Now I'll go ahead and read it out loud, and then I'll also give my commentary here because I want to share my idea and discuss it with you guys and bring more attention to this, as maybe it could potentially actually get implemented. So I already reached out through the Discord server, and I had a conversation with a guy named Keith, who was running the Discord server. I believe he's one of the moderators, managers, if you will. And he told me it'd be a good idea to make a GitHub post about this. So that's what I did. So here's the long version, and then here will be the short version down there. So I believe that the Consumer Rights Wiki is an invaluable resource. I truly do. I don't believe that the wiki is completely there yet, though, but I think it has, for the short time it existed, gone very far. Now, I would like to propose an addition to the wiki that I believe would drastically improve its usefulness and accountability, or accessibility, Jesus, and would help the overall consumer advocacy movement quite well. And I believe that is introducing an API. Now, I already know that there's going to be a certain particular comment down in the comments right now, so some particular specific comment that I'm just expecting to see right after I said that. They paused the video and they're commenting it right now. Hear me out. before you go commenting, hear me out. So here's why I think it'd be an overall benefit. So making the data provided by the Consumer Rights Wiki more accessible is integral to the entire purpose of it, because that's the entire mission of this entire thing, is to make the data more available to consumers. And you may disagree with me here, but I actually personally believe that locking that information down, that information into a singular wiki, is actually not as useful as spreading the information out in a more decentralized manner. If I wanted to fetch or access this data from elsewhere, I'd need to scrape the website currently, which leads to very inconsistent, sloppy, and error-prone results that are unnecessarily resource-intensive for both parties, really. A properly versioned API gives developers like me, for example, a schema-defined interface to access this information cleanly and properly. So instead of it being like just kind of loosey-goosey and everything, there's actually a set governed structure that all of the data is provided in, so there's a level of consistency and assurance there. Rather than it being messy and the client has to handle everything and it's weird. So contributors, watchdogs, and researchers can mirror the content programmatically, preserving it in the case of worst case scenarios like censorship, outages, whatever else. Not to mention, if you introduce an official API for this, you can set and enforce rate limits that make sense for the Consumer Rights Wiki, so that scrappy scraping jobs aren't hogging the bandwidth of the website. This decentralization of the wiki prevents the CRW from becoming a single point of failure. And this is something very important. And I've talked, even when it comes to my own group, Raven, I've talked a lot about single points of failure. Even in the alternate project, that's a big topic of discussion. That's one of the focal points of it, is single points of failure are always bad. And the reason why is because it is inevitable. There's a law called Murphy's Law. And in Murphy's Law, it says what can go wrong inevitably will go wrong. And I actually am a strong believer of this. And I believe that if you stick to just having a singular centralized foundation like that, eventually there's going to be some kind of problems there. Like Wikipedia is a good example. Wikipedia is full of bias and full of, political leaning in a certain direction, and corruption and scandals and everything involving the contributors to shift narratives, and like these kinds of problems can absolutely exist in the consumer rights wiki. Now you can go, oh, we're gonna be like fucking guarding so hard against that shit, bro. Totally. Like if it can go wrong eventually, okay? So allowing an API would allow people to actually access this data in a more consistent manner, and would allow the data to spread out to different services and everything too, who can be built upon this as a foundation more so. So imagine the CRW becoming less of a wiki and more like the hub, the fucking foundation that the entire consumer rights movement's built upon. And then all these other services and everything are built upon it, and it becomes this core. And even if anything, like I said, single point of failure, if anything happens to the consumer rights wiki in that case, then at least the data would have been made available through the API and spread out and everything. So it's generally, I think, just a solid idea, but I'll keep going. So, where was I? Oh yeah, the centralization of the data in the wiki prevents it from becoming a single point of failure, like I just mentioned, both technically and politically, which is a major concern of mine, actually, and of many others I have spoken to regarding the wiki. I've had some discussions with some other developer friends and everything like that about this, and they've all shared similar concerns. And I'm unsure if they've even heard these concerns. I don't know how vocal these concerns are. It's just been kind of between me and these people in these private conversations. But I've had an idea of how to use such an API too. For example, I could build a consumer rights search engine. So imagine, instead of having to navigate this wiki website and stuff, which frankly, you guys may just call this a skill issue or something, but I actually don't have a great time navigating wiki sites. I actually think wiki sites are a little kind of difficult to navigate sometimes. They're a little messy from time to time. So it would be nice if I had what if hell even I integrated AI into it somehow, where I could write in a human prompt, right? A human style prompt, and it would interpret it. And then it could provide me information in a human readable manner like that. Make a very consumer rights search engine that would be very user friendly to even non-tech savvy users, to actually that's based on the consumer rights wiki. It would have the simple UX of a search engine, but displays all the vital information from the wiki about the companies you look up. I'm not trying to self-promote here, of course, but I have a decently sized group and following, and we're focused on digital freedoms and rights and everything, and I could absolutely make this service under that group, and I think it would seriously draw a lot more attention to not only this movement in general, but to all this information. Rather than telling them, go look at this wiki, I can be like, here's a search engine that you just get to search shit up, and I feel like it's just would be I feel like that would be very useful. You could include a rule requiring disclosure that the data is provided by the consumer rights wiki if you wanted to, and you could also rate limit excessive usage. And if you even wanted to turn this into a way of generating revenue for the wiki, to keep it sustainable, you could absolutely offer paid tiers. Now, I know that there's kind of iffiness about paying or whatever, but even Louis Rossmann himself, if you want to take it for example, if you find a service valuable, if you find value and quality in a service that's being provided to you, then you should feel comfortable paying for it. I'm actually a pretty strong believer of that too. I've always, anytime a community member in our group, for example, anytime anyone ever, for example, this guy Homework, who's actually now on the team, by the way, that's funny, but he ended up finding actually a potential vulnerability in a service we provide called Bin. Which is a entirely client-side encrypted paste bin, essentially. So it's like a zero-knowledge encryption type deal. He actually found a vulnerability in it, and he gave us, a full disclosure of the vulnerability and everything. And I thought that was a very valuable service he was providing me by doing that. He put in good work there. That was a really good job, and he caught something that we missed. So I didn't mind tossing a couple bucks his way. Or even a lot of people were like, wait, you pay your Discord moderators? And yeah, it's because our community Discord server, our moderators provide a valuable service. They're like the janitors of the server. They keep it clean and safe for everyone. So that's a service absolutely worth paying for. I'm not about to sit there and then just take this shit for free, right? Might as well put my money to good use and the money of the donators who donate and everything like that. But anyways, as far as this would go, as far as the paid tiers could go, if you're using the consumer rights wiki for your own thing or whatever, and you're finding a lot of value and usefulness in it, then you should be comfortable paying. That's at least what I think. I don't know if they're going to end up even going that route, but as far as I'm aware, the consumer rights wiki doesn't generate any kind of revenue where it could be self-sustainable at all. So the problem there is if you're relying completely on altruism, I personally strongly believe that nothing can run on altruism forever. I don't believe that you can just rely entirely on the kind-heartedness of strangers. So, and what can go wrong will go wrong. So eventually, if there is the possibility that donators stop paying or something like that, that could happen. And then you're entirely at the whim of your donations, right? So if you go this route, then at least it would be possible to generate a little bit of revenue just to keep the whole wiki viable and afloat, which I think would be quite useful. But that's kind of a different, we're kind of going down a different idea here, so let's bring it back. So if I already kind of said this here, but if it remains a single point of failure, then I really worry about the future of this movement, the consumer rights movement, and just the future of this wiki in general. Journalists, researchers, and developers could automatically pull references to corporate misconduct or consumer issues into their own tools, reports, or dashboards. And I already know people are going to say, well, technically you can already do that. Yeah, I know. Just wait. What I'm saying is instead of having a scrappy, really shitty kind of unmaintained, weird, not unmaintained, that's kind of the wrong word, unstructured, having a really unstructured and not really stable foundation to build something like that upon is not a good idea. Developers need stability. They need consistency in the data. They can't just have like different shit for each thing, because good luck trying to fucking parse that. It's going to be hell. And I believe that's already the case with, I think they have some kind of like browser extension built upon the wiki or something, but even that, you know, there's problems there. But I digress. I actually haven't looked into that extension too much, by the way, so just keep that in mind. But I could easily create a browser plugin built upon this API, which warns the user every time they visit the website of a company on the wiki, and it links to the article, for example. Which, by the way, I think what I described right here is exactly what the extension they made already is. When I was writing this, I actually wasn't aware of the extension. So, you know, there's that. A watchdog app could display contextual consumer rights info in real time, increasing reach exponentially without burdening you guys. The short and sweet of this all would be an API would make the data more accessible, more widespread, and eliminate single point of failure, and would take this project from a small wiki into a source for the consumer rights movement, a data source. Now I was told that Media Wiki, which is what the entire website's built upon, and by the way, the whole thing about me saying like, oh, I already know people are going to be commenting and whatever, this is what I was talking about. People are going to say the Media Wiki has an API out of the box. Why not just use that? I was already told that. And I did some research before even reaching out about the idea. And I did learn about this API, including the fact that it's just a generic built-in low-level API that requires you to understand Media Wiki's internals, like query parameters, actions, format options, to extract what you need, which is just a mess. Now, a custom API would be purpose-built for this, to expose exactly the data relevant to consumer rights. For example, simplified endpoints like /cases and then / and you could do whatever, /laws / whatever, company / company name, and then right. That would return a simple structured JSON file. Telling people just use the Media Wiki API isn't great because it's just a generic technical API, not a developer-friendly consumer rights API. It doesn't involve it doesn't solve the problem that this custom API would. It doesn't return clean structured data, but it returns just raw fucking wiki text and HTML. It would be really hard to build any kind of parser for the data, given the data is always unstructured. This is just back to web scraping all over again. So at that fucking point, it might as well just fucking be scraping the pages, right? I'm talking about a clean endpoints, just clean endpoints that return structured JSON, not a generic built-in low-level messy Wikimedia API. If the Media Wiki API was a good option, me and other devs I know would already be using it. We're not, because it's not useful for this purpose. And I mean, I was already actually, you want to know what even started any of this, is I wanted to build a tool based off the Consumer Rights Wiki, and then I realized. So moving forward, so Keith mentioned that that they've also added structured metadata through Cargo to a lot of the pages, which can be accessed via the MediaWiki API. But MediaWiki plus Cargo is just a content store. Developers need stable, schema-governed JSON data, which is not what is currently available. Tables reflect community-maintained templates, which can change without notice. There's no schema governance, migration policy, or backwards compatibility guarantee at all, which is really bad if you're any kind of developer trying to build something upon an API. You need these kinds of guarantees, otherwise, you could just wake up to your whole shit being broken. Frankly, that setup is very messy and loose compared to what I'm proposing. A clean, stable, reliable, purpose-built API for this, rather than some generic-ass fucking, piece of shit API like a MediaWiki API. I'm very open to building a proof of concept if they'd like, because words are pretty little compared to example, so I could try even building a POC using the MediaWiki API to demonstrate the developer difficulties and flaws with it, even if they wanted. Now, Keith said, and I quote, "The cargo tables do have a specified schema which do not change, as they are the data source which the browser extension that is currently being built in is planning to use. Obviously, on any given page, users can edit them, but that's inherent to storing them within the page text. I'm not sure on the specifics, but I can definitely be pulled as JSON and parsed, and as this is how the browser extension uses it. I have a reasonable level of confidence that creating an API would be technically feasible, but the issue would be populating the schema-defined data for all articles. Ultimately, this is something that has to be accessible and convenient for editors to do, otherwise it would be left mostly empty." Which makes sense, right? Cargo definitely helps, and I agree actually that it's a really good backbone. But the thing I'm getting at is, even though they define a schema, they don't really enforce any kind of long-term governance or versioning for it, which is a big problem. They're more of a convenient store rather than a full-blown proper API. Right now, if a template changes, the structure can drift without warning, and downstream consumers have no guarantees about structure, stability, or format. A proper API wouldn't replace Cargo or MediaWiki. It would sit on top of it as a read-only projection layer, basically. It'd take the existing Cargo data, validate it against a structured JSON schema, and publish it through stable endpoints. And this way, it would give external tools and researchers guaranteed version structure while keeping the system intact. Which, if you're any kind of developer, then you would know immediately. This is drastically better than the messy, fucking dealing with the low-level MediaWiki bullshit and not having any kind of guaranteed versioning or governance or anything around it, which is obviously a big problem. Because you could just wake up someday and, like I said, it would change that shit and it would break all your stuff. I was conceptualizing ways this could be done, actually. And there's actually a pretty low maintenance way of going about it, too. So you could easily do a nightly job that reads cargo data through the MediaWiki API, validates it, and outputs static JSON files. If you serve it via some kind of proper setup CDN, then you would even get caching and rate limits for rate limiting kind of built in. Which, by the way, there's many free CDNs out there that they could absolutely use. So if they wanted to have any kind of, like I said, caching and stuff to prevent overload and to prevent excessive bandwidth usage, that would be a fantastic way of going about it. Editor burden is a concern, but it can be mitigated. The point of all this would be to formalize what's already there. Not obviously rebuild the shit, but then just formalize it and make it reliable enough for devs to integrate. Basically a stable, developer-friendly layer on top of what's already made would open the door for many more possibilities instead of a low-level, unstructured, and unstable API devs would have a read-only purpose-built API with a governed schema built on top of what's currently there right now, which would be a big step up from what's currently available for any kind of developer like me who's wanting to build something upon it. As Keith described it, the API would essentially be populated with whatever the last valid entries were for the cargo tables of each page, with the idea being to eliminate the need for extensive client-side validation from those, such as the extension parsing the data via the API. And he's right. So currently it's entirely the responsibility of the client to each, if I ever wanted to build a client, I have to build a client based upon this that parses and handles and validates all the data and does all this shit. I have to do all of this client side and I have to custom build all this shit myself. Versus the server just providing an easy API that just does it for me, which would be the most formal and correct way of going about it. And then plus I have to keep up with any kind of like, because there's no proper governance for the schema, there's no proper versioning or anything like that. I mean, I would have to just, it would be a total really messy setup. If a page's cargo data fails validation, the page wouldn't roll into a new snapshot until it passes, and the data would only expose the last valid data per page. Editors keep the same process they use right now, so it wouldn't be more of a burden, which is probably the best part about this. Instead of each client rolling its own packager, like I just mentioned, it's a single governed and version schema. Validation runs once server side rather than each time client side, instead of clients each re-implementing the whole process on their end. That is just such a much less messy way of going about all this. Having the client entirely do this on their own and re-implement the whole process and everything on their end, and having to parse and validate and all this shit entirely on their own, instead of just single version schema, run once server side. You see my point? It'd be easy to add per key quotas and attribution headers too, if abuse became an issue. So this is really just generally a much smarter way of going about this. So if you barely understood a word I was saying so far, here's the long story short. The goal is to make CRW's data more structured, consistent, and stable for developers, researchers, and watchdogs without changing how editors or the wiki itself operates. So we're just building upon existing foundation. This would be achieved by introducing a read-only versioned API that sits on top of the existing media wiki and cargo foundation. The API would expose validated, schema-defined JSON snapshots of the cargo data through simple, predictable endpoints, for example, like company, and then, company.json or laws, id.json, or some shit like that. Pages that fail validation against a schema would be excluded from the latest snapshot until corrected, with the last known good version retained. The data generation could run on a nightly schedule, producing static JSON files served through a CDN, giving caching, rate limiting, and high resilience by default. There's many reliable free CDNs already out there that can handle this if they wanted to go that route. This way would formalize and stabilize what already exists while adding versioning, governance, and decentralization, effectively turning the CRW from a single wiki site into a full data ecosystem. Which I think would be significantly more valuable of a resource long term. Now, I actually have really high hopes for the Consumer Rights Wiki, and this was my idea. Now, I actually am thinking that sometime soon I actually will sit down and maybe draft up together a little proof of concept. I'm actually not very familiar with MediaWiki. I've never actually even used MediaWiki myself before. Nor am I super familiar with some of this other stuff, but I really could, if I wanted to take the time, I could sit down and try to put something together here, just a little proof of concept or something. But really, this wouldn't be too hard even to make, actually. Again, like, you just need a nightly job, you need to set this shit up, but after you do that, it would be pretty hands-off. And it would provide just a way better, much more structured and clean way for everyone to go about this, even their extension that they're making. It would make development and building upon the CRW way better just across the board. Because instead of me having to, like I said, do all that shit client side and implement all that shit, it's just done once cleanly server side, provided to me in a nice little clean JSON file. I mean, it's just a win-win, and then editors don't even have to change how they're already operating. And it builds on top of the existing foundation. So really, I think that it's kind of just a no-brainer. But as far as the discussion of this project goes, the issue post is available here on their GitHub. So if you did want to actually go and, discuss it, you can write the comments and you could participate in the discussion here. Now, I would actually really appreciate if one of you guys could help make a proof of concept of this whole thing. If you could help conceptualize this and make it a reality. Now, maybe I could even, if you guys wanted to, if I wanted to, because I actually probably could throw some money your way if you wanted to help make this a reality. Because I really want this consumer rights wiki to do well. I really want this consumer rights movement to succeed. So if, hell, if me throwing in a little bit of a bounty to help make this a reality would help the project, I would need to talk to them and, make sure they want to even do that. But if they want to, I wouldn't mind tossing some money up, putting some money up to make this a reality if that's what was needed. If they wanted some developers to help make this possible and they needed someone to do it, I could just, help toss some money their way. I wouldn't mind. But that's about it, really. I just wanted to share my idea with all of you and kind of see how you guys all thought about this whole idea. Discussion in the comments section would be appreciated, and even discussion on the GitHub post. I am really hoping that the consumer rights wiki turns out to be something more than just a wiki, because there's a difference between just providing a singular little wiki like that and then being a full-on data source that can drive an entire movement. That's about it. Oh, and before I go, by the way, alternate stream on Friday. So the last alternate stream that was planned, by the way, was supposed to happen this last Saturday, but it didn't happen, and the reason why was because Homework suffered a medical emergency. He's okay, by the way. I made a whole Twitter post and even a YouTube post about it and everything. He gave a little statement too and showed a picture and everything if you want to go look at that. But he's okay, he's doing better, and we will be doing an alternate stream this Friday. And it's happening at 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. So if you want to show up, you can be there, and we'll all be able to actually discuss this stuff. So that's about it.